our society, there are three sectors: the public, the private, and the nonprofit. That third sector, the nonprofits, is what this show is all about. And I'd like to welcome today my guest, Janice McGuire, who is the president of the Levi Coffin House Association. Welcome, Janice.
Thank you.
I was so excited to have you as a guest because I know just enough about the Levi Coffin House itself to be a little bit dangerous, maybe enough to be excited that I know that it's in Wayne County, but not enough to really be able to explain, especially what's been happening recently,
Yes.
to draw attention to this jewel that we have in our community. So I'm really excited to be able to have this conversation.
Thank you. We're always glad to have the opportunity to share.
Yes, yes, we want to make sure our community understands. So we'll start with, we kind of talked a little bit a few minutes ago about we want to make sure that our audience, our community, has an opportunity to understand that we're not just talking about the Levi Coffin House, which is an historical jewel, within our community, but actually understand that there is an organization that is supporting that location, that place, called the Levi Coffin House Association, and that's where you come into play.
Yes, the interesting thing about the Coffin House, it was a privately owned home until 1966, and everyone in the community always knew the historical significance of it. And so when the lady who owned it and had owned it for the last 40 years, it was privately owned, passed away, people were concerned about what was going to happen to the house. A group of local people got together, persuaded the governor at the time that the state of Indiana should purchase the house, which they did. But they also told this local group that the state didn't have a penny for restoration or operation of the house, and so they were pretty much on their own. And so the Levi Coffin House Association was born. Our parent group was actually the Wayne County Historical Society.
Okay.
The state wanted an already established, well-respected organization to kind of be in charge. And so, like I said, they were kind of our parent group. And so with their help then, the Coffin House Association was established. And of course, it took about 3 years to raise the money and restore the house. And so by the time it opened to the public in 1970, the Coffin House Association was pretty well organized. So we're unique in the state historic site system in that we're the only state historic site that's not operated by the state of Indiana, and we're a totally volunteer group that does that. And so we oversee and have since 1970 the day-to-day operation of the Coffin House with being a totally volunteer organization.
That's wonderful. That's amazing. Obviously, we don't want to overlook and take maybe just a few minutes to remind people a little bit about the actual history. Why is the Levi Coffin House an important place in history?
It was the home, of course, of Levi and Catherine Coffin, and they were North Carolina Quakers who came here in 1826 because of their opposition to slavery. And I like to point out to our visitors that, we have about a 4-county area here in east central Indiana that was primarily settled by those North Carolina Quakers coming because of their opposition to slavery. And so the Coffins came and settled in Newport, which was the name of Fountain City when they came. And Levi says it didn't take very long to realize that they were on a route of what we now call the Underground Railroad. Mm-hmm. And so they began doing everything they could, opening their home, providing food, clothing, transportation, so on, for the freedom seekers that were coming, north and trying to reach safety in Canada, which, of course, they had to go all the way to Canada because of our laws here in the United States. So it became a very active and well-known stop on the Underground Railroad. Levi's friends gave him the title of president of the Underground Railroad, we think just because the sheer numbers of folks he was able to assist. And so the house is a very important, not only to our local history and our state history, but it plays such an important role in our national history as well. So we're quite proud of the fact that in addition to being a state historic site, we're a national historic landmark. And in 1998, President Clinton signed the Network to Freedom Bill, and it has assigned the National Park Service within our federal level to be the entity that oversees the commemoration of and so on the Underground Railroad. And so we're also one of those National Network to Freedom sites as well.
Wow, I had no idea we were that nationally connected. That's really cool. Yeah, I know that we chatted a few minutes about the fact that we really want to make sure our community understands that as we celebrate the Levi Coffin House and all that it means for us locally, that it really does have national significance, and that we have a lot to be proud of in our community for what we have to contribute to the history of our nation.
Certainly. Again, I think it's very typical of people that you sometimes don't know what you have in your own backyard.
Exactly.
Again, Wayne County, Randolph County, Union to the south and Henry to the west was such an important part of this Underground Railroad system or whatever in Indiana. And being a Quaker settlement and so on or whatever just encouraged the freedom seekers or whatever. They knew that they could come here
Right.
and receive the assistance that they needed. So, like I said, it's very sometimes overlooked by our own community.
I think so, unfortunately.
That it played such an important role in our national history.
So let's talk for a few minutes about how the Levi Coffin House Association has reached out into the community, I would guess probably regionally, to specific groups of people. I know that school-age children are in the house frequently.
Yes.
But can we talk about specific types of programming or opportunities that where the house is open for people to learn?
Because we're a totally volunteer group, our hours are a little bit different and so on than other state historic sites, but we open in April and May specifically for those school groups.
Okay.
Of course, fourth graders study Indiana history.
Right.
The Underground Railroad, Levi Coffin are part of the standards for fourth grade history, and so we usually have about 2,000 students and teachers and their chaperones or parents.
Right.
We joke that we've become a very popular field trip for parents.
Oh yeah.
But in the year's time, especially in April and May, we are open for those, specifically for those school groups. We have a lot of college level groups, IU East and Earlham groups who come.
That's good.
As well. And during the year, again, we find it very interesting. We, of course, have a guest book, and we find that in our season, our year's time that we are open, we'll have visitors from anywhere from 38 to 42 states, and we usually have visitors from 10 to 12 foreign countries as well. So mostly our emphasis, of course, is for the students, and we participate in a lot of other things. This past Saturday, I was at the State Museum. They were celebrating Women's History Month, and so we were celebrating the contributions of Catherine Coffin,
Oh, nice.
who often gets overlooked. We hear all about Levi, but not as much about Catherine. I'm participating in April. The Cincinnati Quaker Meeting is celebrating its 200th anniversary, and there's going to be special sessions about Levi because when the Coffins left Wayne County in 1847, they moved to Cincinnati and lived the rest of their lives.
Okay.
I'm going in June to the National Network to Freedom Conference that will be held in Hilton Head, South Carolina this year. So we're involved, going to various conferences and so on or whatever, sometimes hosting them as well for both state and national conferences and so on.
That's wonderful. So students come, and what can they experience? So if a student group wanted to come, and I would guess that if a family wanted to come, and they know that the Coffin House is open, then what kind of experience would they have?
Well, on the tour, obviously, we not only share just the the history of Levi, but we love to tell stories from Levi's book. He wrote the book Reminiscences of Levi Coffin, 700 and some pages long.
Oh, wow.
I always suggest to the students that they might want to read it. You know, in every room we try to find a story that Levi tells in his book that might be associated with that particular room. Because I think telling the story in Levi's own words means a lot more than us just simply giving a, you know, a run-of-the-mill tour or whatever.
Right, sure. And then, so we talked about student groups and you talked about college groups. Are there any other types of groups or people that seem to be drawn to?
It's interesting that we have a lot of the tour groups, adult tour groups, retired groups and so on. We have a tour company in Wisconsin that brings 2 busloads every year to the Coffin House. They started several years ago, and it has become one of their most popular trips, and so they come every year. I think, again, I think since the 1998 act that was signed and so on, the interest in the Underground Railroad has just kind of snowballed. There's so much more research being done, lots of books. We get requests all the time for photographs and information and so on or whatever, that, you know, the interest is over a wide range of folks. Obviously, people who are interested in history in general, but you know, come because of their interest in this particular period in our history, and especially the fact that the last few years, of course, we've been commemorating the Civil War.
We talked about the association, and we wanted to make sure that that our community understands that it's specifically to care for this jewel, this treasure that we have in our community. So we wanted to make sure that we took a few minutes to talk about, okay, so how do people in our community support? How do they connect? How do they engage in making sure that both the history is you know, saved and passed along in a number of ways, but also that we can make sure that physically we are taking care of the house and, you know, all that it contains. So how can people get engaged, and how can we be supportive?
Well, one of the ways, of course, is by volunteering. We are like every other not-for-profit organization in the world, probably, in that we are always in need of volunteers. So anyone who finds, again, history particularly interesting to them, we have a very small but dedicated group of volunteers. And so we're always looking for volunteers. For example, in April already, we have a group of 96 students coming from South Adams. To handle 96 students at one time, we need a lot of volunteers. A lot of children. So we're always looking for volunteers that way.
And what would that look like, Janice? Okay, say I have the time to be there while those 90+ students are at the Levi Coffin House. What would I be doing?
What we do, we try not to scare people off too soon.
That's nice.
And so we just simply have them learn one room at a time.
Okay.
You know, there are 8 rooms in the house or whatever, and on those occasions we have a volunteer in every room.
Okay.
And the kids move from room to room, but the volunteer stays in a room. So we always say all you have to do is learn one room at a time, and then after you're there for a while, we have you learn the second and the third, and before you know it, you're able to do the entire tour.
Oh, nice.
But again, we try to break people in very slowly, and especially. A lot of people, there's a particular room, particular stories that they find interesting, and so they want to learn that room first. Like I said, we try to work with them however they want to volunteer.
Okay.
Obviously, there are other things. We always have research that we want to do, and there's never enough time. It's important, obviously, for us to keep the house open.
Right.
And so then we don't feel like we sometimes have the amount of time that we would like to do to research some of the things that, you sort of check one thing off the list and it raises 2 more questions that you want to.
See, that's a very unique volunteer experience. That I've talked to a lot of nonprofit organizations through this show. That's the first time. That's the very first time I've ever had anybody say they could use help with research.
There's things like, for example, we know a portrait of Catherine Coffin exists, but we don't know where it's at.
Oh, wow.
Okay, we have 2 portraits of Levi, several photographs, but we only have 1 image of Catherine that we've ever been able to find. But we know from the Cincinnati Art Museum that a painting of hers exists. But so where is it? You know, genealogy research, just all kinds of things that down through the years have come up, and we're like, oh, we need to find out more about that. So that kind of thing, if people are interested in that.
And see, for that, they wouldn't even have to physically be
No.
there, which would
No.
be an opportunity
Yeah,
that
they
maybe
like
someone...
to be on a computer a
yes,
lot.
yeah, that would be... And there are people that would really
Yes.
enjoy that, and they could give of their time, which is so valuable.
Right.
So, that would be... That's pretty
We
cool.
actually do have a group, actually from Ohio, but a gardeners group that's going to come and plant our herb garden this year.
Oh.
So we've been looking for a group or individuals to do
Right.
that for some time. And so we have that. So, you know, there's various ways that people can volunteer, obviously. We do have memberships. People can support the house financially. And of course, right now, we're in a very important capital campaign.
That's right.
That to support the construction of our visitor center. So that's going to be very important. And so both volunteering and financially, there are ways for folks to help out.
What's the timeline for the visitor center?
What we're hoping is that construction will actually start this year, hopefully this summer.
Okay.
The plan is to have the visitor center, the interpretive center, open next year during 2016 because Indiana will be celebrating our bicentennial.
That's right, our
Lots of
birthday.
celebrations all over the state. So we hope one of those is going to be ours with the opening of our visitor center.
Well, that's neat. And I warned you that I would probably get to this question and have a few minutes. I always like to know from our guests. I think it's amazing that you say that the Levi Coffin House Association is unique among historical societies in that it's all volunteer. It's not state run. And I think we need to make sure our community understands what that means in the form of commitment. So I want to first say thank you. Thank you for your time and your commitment to something that's very valuable, not only to us, but to our country. And you are helping to keep that, so thank you. But why would you be interested? Why would Janice McGuire want to give of her time and her talent to the Levi Coffin House Association?
As I always tell people, you know, I was a high school math teacher, but I've always loved history.
Okay.
And growing up, places like the Coffin House were the places that my family visited. So we always had an appreciation for those kinds of things. And so during our country's bicentennial, and in 1976, you know, every little town had their
Sure.
bicentennial celebration, and Fountain City included. And my husband and I had been married and living in town for about 4 years at that point in time. And we said to a family friend, Henry Macy, which a lot of people in this community knew of, that we'd like to get involved. Again, something that we were proud of that was in our community, and because that was the kind of thing we enjoyed or whatever. And we've always joked that they were as desperate for volunteers then as we are now. So you only have to say one time, I'd like to volunteer, and we're going to take you up on it. And so Henry did just that, and so we became involved that next year or whatever. Helping to give tours and so on. And it just sort of, it's just gradually been one of those things where, you know, as I said, we have wonderful volunteers who love to come and give the tours, but don't necessarily want to deal with sort of the business end of it. And we do have that, of course, that we have to deal with, and the fundraising and answering lots of letters from students who are doing projects.
Oh, see, I didn't even think about that part of it.
Scheduling the school groups and the volunteers and all of that. So there's a, you know, that end of it that's not quite as much fun
Not as glamorous.
actually giving the tours. And so it just kind of has evolved. My sister and I, we jokingly are referred to as the Coffin House Sisters. That you know, sort of do the behind the scenes work. And so it's just one of those things that, you know, as the Coffin House, you know, became more known, and the national significance and so on, and connections in these conferences, we're the ones who who go and have become involved, and so it's just become kind of almost a full-time thing for us now, even though it is volunteer.
That's wonderful. Well, again, I say thank you. I'd like to ask, though, since I like the idea of volunteers starting with one room. I was thinking, how in the world would you learn all of that information? I would be very intimidated about being a tour guide because it's awful that I have grown up in the area and would know, very little. But the idea of learning one room, I thought, lots of people could do that.
Yes.
So if someone came up to you, Janice, and said, do you have a favorite room? If you were a volunteer, where would you start? And can you share with us maybe a short story? It's one of your favorites?
It's hard to pinpoint a favorite of mine. I think one of my favorite places in the house is the kitchen in the basement and the spring room. Always because people are so absolutely amazed by the fact that we have a spring-fed well in the basement of the house.
Oh, wow.
Fountain City was given that name because when they changed the name of the town from Newport, because there's another Newport, Indiana, they were getting the mail mixed up. They chose Fountain City because, of course, we have a lot of springs in this area, and a lot of people are familiar with the springs at Glen Miller Park.
Right.
But evidently Levi knew there was a spring on this property as they were having the house built in 1839, and they incorporated the well in the basement of the house. And so it's a very unique feature, and when we take visitors down there and we're sharing with them about the well, the water is so clear that people don't actually realize it's a 4-foot deep well. They don't realize that there's water in it until I go down and splash my hand in it. So it's such a unique feature of the house or whatever, and people are always so amazed by it that I guess that's probably my favorite spot in the house.
And do you have a favorite story from the book that is maybe one of your...
Probably
if you only get to tell one story to a group, what would be
it would probably be the story that Levi says that in the middle of the night or early morning hours, a wagon bringing the freedom seekers, the runaway slaves, would arrive, often from Union County. And so he tells one time when they heard the knock on the door, they came and there were 2 wagons sitting there. And Catherine recognized the drivers as being from Union County, and she said, well, what do we have today? And one of them said, all of Kentucky. And she said, well, bring all of Kentucky in. And I've always said it must have seemed that way when 17 fugitive slaves came streaming through the door. Now, that's the largest number that he ever talks about as having arrived at one time. But I love Catherine's response, well, bring all of Kentucky in. I've always said nothing seemed to fluster Catherine. I've always joked that if you had 6 kids of your own and your mother-in-law living with you, what's a few more people? And Levi's very complimentary. He says he could not have done this work, all of his life without the fact that Catherine felt as strongly as he did and did everything she could as well. So,
those are neat stories. It makes me want to. I have to be honest. I've never participated in a tour of the house. So shame on me.
Yes, we find that a lot.
Shame
and
on
I think
me.
the fact that we have limited hours is one of those reasons. In our regular season, June, July, and August, we're open Tuesday through Saturday, 1 to 4. And then in September and October, Saturday only, just because after school starts, of course, our numbers kind of dwindle. And by that time, we've worn our volunteers out.
So we want to make sure that our community understands that they can give of their time, give of their talent. I'm so intrigued about the idea of using a skill set to help with research. That's just a really neat idea that they need to make sure that they are going to, and I'm saying this as a shame on me again, make sure they're going to go through the tour themselves so that they can tell other people about it. But we only have a few minutes left, Janice, and I want to make sure that I always wrap up with, is there something that we haven't covered, something that hasn't necessarily been a part of our conversation yet, that you would want to make sure that our community members understand about either the Levi Coffin House or the Levi Coffin House Association?
Well, I think it been pretty well publicized that in October we finally did break ground for our new visitor center, our new interpretive center, which has long been our dream. And again, we hope construction will start this summer and open next year. It's going to be such a wonderful addition because, as we jokingly say, we're excited mostly because we'll have public restrooms.
Oh, yay!
We're going to have a wonderful auditorium. We've already filmed the video, introductory video people will see, with a whole reenactment of freedom seekers coming to the house. Wonderful exhibits on the third floor, especially for the students to enhance their visit or whatever. So we invite people to like us on Facebook. The
I was
Levi
going to
Coffin
say,
House.
surely there's an internet way we
Yes.
can get connected here.
And of course, Waynet at waynet.org/Levi Coffin.
Okay.
Jane has beautiful photographs and lots of other sites that people can go to. But like us on Facebook, you can follow the construction of our visitor center. We put a lot of genealogy information and different things, stories from Levi's book and that on it. But again, any organization that would like for us to come and share more about our capital campaign, we would be happy to do that. It's a $3.2 million project.
Oh my.
We are at about 80% of that, but we have a ways to go. And I tell people, the Levi Coffin House, the Coffin House Association, since we opened in 1970, we've never gone back to this community for financial support. Being a volunteer group, you don't have a lot of expenses, you know. And so now we're going once again back to the community,
step it up,
and
Here we
hope
go.
that they will support us because of. I think again they should be proud of what the people in this community and the volunteers that we have been able to do in the last 45 years of keeping the house open and so on. And so now we need their help again to go that next step and enhance the visit to the Coffin House even more with our visitor center.
Thank you so much, Janice, for your time, and thank you again for what you put into our, like we said, a jewel, a treasure in our community. And thank you for joining us on the Third Sector.